Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Welcome to the podcast, brother.
I am Pierce Nahigian, the elder brother.
And I am Derek Hobson, the younger brother.
And this is Losing Lost. We're going to get it. We're going to get it one of these days.
You know what it is? I think actually the welcome to the podcast throws me off because I'm like, that's the name of it. And then I'm like, no, it's not.
Today, we are talking about Season 1, Episode 10 of Lost, Raised by Another. It first aired on ABC on December 1st, 2004. I have nothing to say about this episode.
Yeah, tell me what did you think of it? At least on like a on a graded scale or on a scale of 1 to 10 or
it's weird. I don't have any major criticisms of the episode. I don't think it's a bad episode. I think I would feel differently about this episode if anything to do with Claire or her baby really mattered in the series. I feel like Damon Lindelof is all over this episode because of the psychic totally knows something. And that whole thing I thought was effectively creepy, but it left me with so many questions that he gives this impression that if Claire doesn't raise this baby herself, he's going to be a Hitler. But as for the episode itself, I think it has one of the best endings of any episode in the show. That ending of Hurley running up to Jack and saying somebody wasn't on the manifest, and then Ethan just being like, hey.
And it's yeah, him doing his best Bill Murray in Osmosis Jones impression.
It's so funny because up until this episode, he's been a regular guy, and then he just has that vacant stare at the end of the episode, and it's totally chilling. And you're just like, oh shit, what is this? What is happening? So yeah, I feel neutral on the most of the episode, and I don't know if Claire is a good actress, which I guess we can talk about later. Anyway, I've talked enough about it. What did you think about this episode?
I felt very similarly. I watched it for the first time in a long time because I want to say I probably skipped this episode on rewatches. I felt very neutral, where I'm like, it was tight, it was concise. I'm not invested in Claire, but I can't point to anything and be like, why'd they do that? Everything worked. But on a rewatch, I definitely think that there is a miscommunication. In some ways, actors' performances, in some ways, the editing. And the best example I can give, and I'll jump into this one now, is Charlie. It is absolutely a natural progression when someone suffers addiction and they go through recovery. In the early stages of recovery, they enter into a pink cloud, which is where they feel euphoric. They can take on the world. They're happy about the fact that they're overcoming their addiction, and that's great. It is also why in certain programs, such as Alcoholics Anonymous, you will not start a intimate relationship with someone for at least a year. And I think that Dominic Monaghan is playing this well. I think he's doing the right thing. But you notice that whoever is directing or editing this show, when he kind of does this whole thing of I think about how lonely you are, and I think I could be your friend. And then they play the Michael Giacchino score, and I'm like, no. This is not romantic. Dominic Monaghan's doing the right thing. He's playing this part right, but whoever was directing it was like, oh yeah, this is romantic. I'm going to play the score. And it's like, no, this is not the time to play the score. I think there's that level of disconnect with a couple other things that I'll point out as we go through it. But yeah, that to me is I think Charlie is character-wise, I think this makes absolute sense for him to play this up now. I appreciate that Claire doesn't immediately jump into it. And I think that Dominic Monaghan is playing it right. But they misread the scene. When they got the script, this was not the way to play it.
I agree with that, actually. I feel that the tone isn't quite right. And Charlie's got that very sort of manic energy where it's like he's so excited about this new thing that he can glom onto, which is why they have that rule in AA where it's like you're gonna wanna just jump onto any new relationship and be like, this is I can fixate on this. This is my new drug, basically. And they're like, no, that's just because the thing is, if that person is not responsible for your sobriety, and also if this person breaks your heart, it's going to become twice as hard to stay sober.
Yeah.
That I have more notes about that when we get to it in the recap, but the tone isn't quite right. And I think you make a very good point there that there's something off about that whole interaction. The show isn't serving the characters. I totally agree with you about that.
Just to kind of cut ahead here with Claire's Kmart version of Elijah Wood boyfriend. I think that actor is doing his scene where he breaks up with Claire wrong. He should have read that and played it as though this is out of character, as though it should feel like someone has told him, you need to break up with her.
I felt the opposite for that one. I actually felt like he played that scene really realistically, and Claire kind of just comes off as just very yelly, just kind of like a toddler, just being upset. And which is kind of how I feel about most of her acting, where it's like she's either real quiet and nice, or she's just screaming. And again, I don't know if I'm just not vibing with the actor, or if I'm just, or I can't tell. I think that I'm too biased on Claire as a character to know. But I felt like he was playing it very, very real, and she was playing it way over the top. But again, I mean, I understand that is a big emotional thing. Like, you are pregnant, you weren't sure about it, your boyfriend said, no, let's do it. And then he's just like, nah.
No, and I mean, to a degree, like, if he did play it right, then I guess, yeah. No, I think he did it wrong. I think, because I will say during the breakup scene, he does throw in one part where he's like, oh, here we go with your daddy problems. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, no one told him to say that. But
David Lindelof told him to say that. Yeah, is what it is.
But like, I just get the impression that with what they have done, and I will say there is definitely a lot of inspiration drawn from the Omen. Because I love that even when they find out they're pregnant, she's like, how long has it been? He's like, it's been 66 seconds. And then she's like, I'm 6 weeks late. And I'm like, there it is. you got the beast number there. That's I just, I get the impression that he should have been more like scared of breaking up with her. And I have some thoughts too around the psychic, which I'm sure we'll get to.
I could swear that there is another episode where he talks to a character and says that he's a fraud.
Yeah.
But everything in this episode points to he has real psychic powers. He knows that this plane is going to crash, and he is setting her up for this. Like, he gives her $6,000 to get on the plane. Like, that's not nothing.
Yeah. But I know what you're talking about, because yes, he absolutely does show up in another. I don't even know whose flashback it is, but I know it's like some like unrelated character where he's like, I'm a fraud. Okay, that's what I do. And it's like, what? I do have some context regarding this episode because I did look it up.
Ooh.
And I, again, had nothing to say. I was like, I should look up something. The only thing I found, because I did look up an interview with Emilie de Ravin, and she's not interesting. But there was one with David Lindelof where he mentioned that, and he echoed what you had said, how Solitary and this one, Raised by Another, were written at the very least concurrently. He said when this episode was going to go up, they knew they had a hit on their hands. And he's like, usually in the show business, when you have a hit, they're like, you guys got it. Do what you will. You've got this thing under control. And he said the opposite thing happened when producers or the studio execs read Raised by Another, where they were like, you need to be real careful about this episode. And he said it in the interview, because I was reading the Q&A.
Is it because of like baby stuff?
That's immediately where I went. I'm like, is it going to be like, because they're kind of talking about abortion in the beginning? But no, it was due to making it real that, yes, there were other people on this island. And it leads to the supernatural elements with this whole psychic, because they were saying like, look, you had an episode on finding water and it was solid. It was great. Audiences reacted well to it. And they're like, well, yeah, but we can't have every episode be, where are they going to find water? Where are they going to find food? They're like, we have to start building out new and unique issues. And this was one of them, is having people on the island who are already there. It doesn't sound like the baby stuff and abortion had anything to do with it. It sounds like it was just that the executives were concerned about them having psychics and having people on the island already.
It seems like the producers were okay with a little bit of magic, but they didn't want it to get all freaky deaky. Like they didn't want it to go crazy, which is eventually what happened anyway. So you just can't.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting though. And that's why I do think in certain areas, I feel there's a disconnect. And I get that part of it probably is the mystique of not knowing what necessarily character motivations are. Because for instance, maybe the guy playing Kmart Elijah Wood is...
I think his name is Thomas.
I don't think it should have been as vague as it was. I get the impression that interference led certain scenes and certainly certain discrepancies come to a head as they try to balance out. Let's not go too far into the deep end, because I think that the fact that we disagree on how Thomas plays that breakup part, maybe that is intentional, like you said, where they don't want it to be out of character, but they don't want it to be in character. And they want to toe that line so that it could just be that this is a teen drama breakup.
I think to go back to the psychic thing, my main issue with that is that on an initial watch, it's very intriguing because it's like, oh shit, he's seeing something. He's really scared. But we learn absolutely nothing about what he saw, about what the danger is, and it doesn't really come up again. I mean, unless I'm completely forgetting it. I could be forgetting that there's like a major thing there, but her child for like 2 or 3 years is raised by another, and nothing goes wrong. I mean, other than, all of the things that are already going wrong, which are caused by people being on the island in the first place. So it's a very flimsy hook to hang all of this stuff on,
Well, that's why there was a part of me, and again, pretty much up until the last scene with the psychic where he gives her the ticket to Flight 815, there was a part of me that was like, can you interpret what he's doing as he's purposely trying to make her discredit him? Like when he's holding her hands, does he see this horrific plane crash where hundreds of people die and people are left stranded on the island with a horrific monster? And he's like, this is terrible. How can I prevent this from happening? And she's like, oh, I'm going to give up this baby anyway. And he's like, and then in his vision, he remembers like, oh my God, the whole reason that she winds up on that plane and that horrible crash happens is because she was going to give up her baby. How can I make her not give up her baby? And so he's like, you have to raise this child. You have to do it. She's like, no, forget it. I'm gonna leave it up to adoption. He's like, oh my God, she won't listen to me. And then he's like, oh my God, she won't listen to me. Here's a flight. Get on 815. Here's $6,000. Surely she won't do it.
There's a darker reading there, though, is that his psychic powers only extend to knowing that the plane disappears and probably crashes. And he's like, she's carrying the second coming of Hitler. I'll put her on this plane and it's not a problem anymore because and her baby will be dead.
That is, that would align with the Omen.
I mean, it's not Charlie's interpretation, which I think Charlie's interpretation is probably what the show is trying to tell us. But that's the way I always like to think about it, where it's just sort of like, this woman's baby is the devil, and I need to get rid of it. We need to drown it in the ocean.
I mean, I like that because, the whole, I don't know if you ever saw The Omen.
Oh yeah, I've seen all the Omens.
Oh,
Well, except
okay.
for the new one. I'm sure they've made like a bunch of new ones, but
I yeah. I only saw the one that was 2006 because that was their whole marketing campaign was June 6th, 2006. If you
that's actually
ignore
pretty
some
good.
of those numbers. um, but I remember watching that movie with Ted of all people, and he's like, I'm realizing that the whole premise here is we want you to root for the guy that's going to kill a baby. And, and he's like, that's kind of weird and kind of messed up. And it would make sense with that interpretation that if like the psychic sees this baby as the next coming of Hitler, it's like, I don't want to dip my toes in it. I can't. You don't. It's the same thing that people always talk. Like, didn't they make them cut that out of the Deadpool movie where he goes back in time and kills Hitler? And people are like, no, man, not cool.
No, I think that's totally in there. Actually, I think.
Oh, it is.
I think it's in the final movie.
I think your interpretation of that's like, I need to kill this baby without killing this baby is like, I mean, and I guess if you think about it, like their first scene together is really like, should we abort or have a baby?
Mm-hmm.
And since they do kind of dance around that subject, that's real interesting. I like that. I think it is horrifying and certainly puts the psychic in a very different light.
Right? I don't think
Man.
I don't think the show's trying to go there, but I enjoy that's my headcanon. The psychic's like, I gotta get rid of this baby.
Yeah, that's oh man.
Because what is it? What is the thing? Like, what's the thing? Like, what is it about the baby?
No, and you're right. I mean, I think that's the thing, because I do think this episode is totally fine. I feel good about it. Like, I think that there's a lot of neat stuff, and it's very tight.
Yeah.
Again, doesn't fray like the way that Sun's episode does.
No, yeah, it is. Generally, it's good. Like, all the character stuff that we've talked about in the previous episodes is on point. Like, all of the characters behave like how we know them to behave. But, like, even that short little scene between Hurley and Sawyer, I just really enjoyed.
Oh, that's the first note I have is that moment. But yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah, I think that I should have looked that up because I don't think anything really happens with Aaron.
No, like, we get stuff with Walt later on. Like, it's clear that they had a lot more planned for him, but we get bits and pieces of it. And again, the epilogue that you haven't seen kind of puts a bow on all of that. Like, it's Walt's in the epilogue, and it fits.
That's cool.
Yeah, the kid, he's just a baby. I think there's some indication somewhere down the line that maybe he should be like the heir to the island. Like, one day he'll be like a Jacob or something, but I don't think that goes anywhere.
Yeah, I think the only other interpretation would be that it's like predestination or like Eloise hockey. And I don't know if anything comes of this because I don't think anything does. Like, I know how, she made it very clear, like, oh, you've got to break up with this girl so I can get you to the island and all that stuff. And I wonder if the psychic is kind of like that, where it's like, oh, for all of these events to unfold and for the man in black to be defeated, I need to get her to the island.
That's interesting. Like, what if he, like, that whole first time that he, like, meets with her, he gets a flash of, like, everything that happens, like, all of the things that need to align so Jack can plug a hole. And he's just like, I don't want to, nope, I'm out. And then he, like, sends her away. And then when she comes back and he, like, reads the thing, he puts it all together like Sherlock Holmes, the Robert Downey Jr. movie. Just like, all right, she needs to get on the island, and then this thing needs to happen, and then the baby needs to get off the island, and there's all this stuff. And then evil will be vanquished, and the man in black will be gone. Yes, okay, yes, let's do this. And that's why he's calling her for 4 months. He's like, you need to get on that plane. You do not understand how important this is.
We'll have to keep an eye on it because doesn't Claire even just disappear for like seasons 4 through 5? 4 and 5?
I think she does.
Yeah, it's interesting enough. So, like, yeah, I guess even Charlie's thing at the tail end there, he's like, well, maybe he did send you here so you could. It's like, yeah, that's one way to look at it, and it's totally serviceable as an answer, but it's also like, well, maybe there's something else going on.
Yeah,
I liked it. I thought it was a great episode. As you mentioned, I think the last 5 minutes is just so good.
I didn't dislike it. I think it would come nowhere in my rankings of like top episodes, but it wasn't a bad episode.
Before going into the recap of it, that I want to mention. One is, as much as I hated it, I do got to admire that it sounds like the actress Emilie's screaming was super. So painful.
It's horrible to hear. It really does sound like somebody's being murdered.
But it's also like, I think of every single movie, both like hundreds of millions of dollars as well as those that cost nickels, where they use like a stock scream. And how much it does, just like similar to like a lot of those sound effects or like the Wilhelm scream or whatever, that just like they take you out of it because you're like, right, I've heard that a million times. And I am really grateful that they didn't do that. It sounds like she's screaming.
That is a very good point. That was something I didn't take this note, but I remember watching it and thinking like, the director clearly told her, especially I think that second time when she thinks somebody's like injecting her with something, clearly told her, I want you to scream as loud as you can. And she does. And hats off, because that is not easy to do, especially to do that and not really mess up your vocal cords. Like she's letting it go. Like it's so it's kudos.
It's like I praise it. I don't like it, but I do. I also, I guess I prefer it to like a stock scream.
I'm just thinking about the Green Goblin scream in the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. That's you could definitely hear. Yeah,
that's the scream I'm thinking of. I didn't know what that one was called, but I'm like, that is literally like, it takes you out of the movie in a heartbeat. The other question I had just before we get really into it, because this comes up, Kate says that Sayid has been gone for a week, and this is something that during Solitary I don't think we really talked about, because since it's happening, Sayid's stuff is happening concurrently with the golf course. I think I just assumed it was happening in the same day, but I'm wondering now if Sayid was tortured for like 3 or 4 days.
So I think he was traveling along the beach for like 2 or 3 days. He was held by Rousseau for like 1 or 2 days, and then it took him another 2 days to get back, because Kate says he's been gone for almost a week. So I think that timeline makes sense. Like 2 days walking up the beach, 2 days ish with Rousseau, 2 days to get back.
Okay.
We open on Claire's eye. She hears a baby's cry and wakes up in the caves. She sees that she's not pregnant, so this is a dream. She trumps through the jungle to find Locke messing with a tarot deck. His eyes are the black and white stones from the game that we saw in the beginning. So she finds a crib in the jungle with an oceanic airplane mobile. There's some cool Foley work as the planes spin around. You hear like the creaking plane noise. I thought that was very effective.
Yeah.
She starts opening like just like blankets upon blankets upon blankets. This actually is kind of like a dream sequence in the first Hellraiser movie, where Kirsty hears a baby crying and then sees like a body bleeding through like a tablecloth. I'm curious if it was intentionally an homage to that, or if it's just a weird coincidence. She finds blood in the crib. As a parent, this is the kind of dream where it just completely messes you up for like a week. Like you're just like, I don't know what's going on in my brain anymore. She wakes up screaming with blood in her hands. Charlie says she was sleepwalking. And then we come back to Jack patching her up. We learn that she dug her nails into her palms so hard that she drew blood. We learn that Jack said some stuff in his sleep once. Maybe it was creepy. Maybe it was just misogynistic. Who knows what it was?
This is where I'm going to pause, because I love this kind of stuff. In the same way that we learned in like the pilot where, he's like, I took a few pilot lessons, wasn't for me. And it's like, oh, it's an interesting detail. I would have liked to have seen that. What was that? But what I like about this, Jack, is that we get a lot by how he reacts to Claire, as well as like that, where he's like, oh yeah, someone told me I talked in my sleep. I don't know what I said, but she didn't like it. And on some level it's like, oh, poor Jack. And then later he basically says like, well, I think Claire's hormones are acting up, and I think that's why she's freaking out. And it's like, Jack, I don't think you might be a good lover. Like, this sounds like maybe this is the kind of thing. Maybe you weren't talking in your sleep. Maybe you were falling asleep while she was talking to you. You know, like, it's like,
It's not what you said, Jack. It's what you didn't say.
Yeah. I really like that this is like how we get glimpses of how Jack handles relationships. It doesn't sound good, but it is very in keeping with his character.
All of that being said, I feel that Jack in this episode is friendlier than we've seen, I think, in maybe any episode. Except for maybe the previous one where he's playing golf. But like, he's genuinely like, he's letting people into his thought process. He's asking questions. He's asking like advice. Like, he's trying to comfort Kate. Like, this is a very friendly Jack.
He doesn't want to raise the baby.
He doesn't want to raise the baby. And also he's got a lot of people in the caves, and Jack loves caves. And so as long as people are in caves, he's happy.
All right. But I think that he's like, I don't want to deliver this baby. I don't want to deal with a baby. I don't want to do it.
I mean, can you imagine, like, the show, hangs a lampshade on this many times where it's like, Jack is a spinal surgeon. You have to be very skilled to do that, but it doesn't mean that you can fix every single problem. Like, doing surgery on a spine and delivering a baby are almost as the opposite ends of the doctor spectrum. Like, it's a completely different skill set. And Jack's just looking around and sort of like, whoa, I know I'm gonna have to deliver this baby, and I really wish that I didn't have to do that.
Oh man.
All right, so we go to Jack finally brings up the fact that Claire got on a plane in her third trimester. Claire says her OBGYN was cool with it, and it seems to me like she's lying, right? Like, it seems like she's evading the thing. Like, Jack kind of gives her a look and she's like, okay.
No, this is where I think we can give Emilie credit here, because I think she plays this very well, where it's clear Claire is lying.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time we see the honesty come out is when I forget what it was that he asked her about.
He's talking about how she feels, and like, she's just going about like, well, when I stand up I get dizzy and I have to pee all the time, and
yeah, then she starts getting honest. And I think they purposely didn't show her meeting with an OBG during her whole flashbacks, because they're like, she doesn't even have one. She probably doesn't even have insurance.
You know what struck me in this scene specifically is how young she is. I assumed she was in like her mid-20s. I'm looking at her in this episode as a 36-year-old man being like, she's a kid, which kind of makes the Charlie relationship not as cool for me, because like, Dominic Monaghan is not a kid. I mean, he's a relatively young rock star, but like, he's not a kid. He's in his mid to late 20s, if that.
Yeah, the age stuff always gets gross. I love Paul Bettany, but I remember seeing Infinity War when he and Elizabeth Olsen are being romantic, and I'm like, isn't Paul Bettany like 25 years older than her?
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. On the one hand, I'm like, well, he's a robot, so he can be whatever. And then on the other hand, I'm like, well, yeah, but if he's a robot, why does he look like that when he could look like anything? He can phase through walls. Clearly, he can move around his matter. But then I'm like, well, I'm just glad Paul Bettany's getting work. And it's like, okay, yeah, but seriously, how old is Elizabeth Olsen? She's like the third Olsen kid, so she's got to be pretty damn young. Yeah. So yeah, I'm with you on that one.
That's literally my same thought process.
We get our first flashback. Claire and her boyfriend freaking out about the pregnancy test. She's 6 weeks late. Thomas says maybe they should have the baby. And she's like, really? And he's like, yeah, everything's going to be great. We also learned that Claire's mother has basically disowned her. We don't get any more information about that. I assume that's coming up in a later episode, or maybe it'll never be touched on again. I really remember very little about Claire's story other than Jack's father is her father.
And I'm realizing that it's meaningless, but I have more emotional attachment, and I forget if it's at the end of this season or if it's like if they hold it off for like another season. There's at least at some point in the series where we find out that Sawyer met Jack's dad and doesn't share it. And I want to say it's like a season later that he tells Jack, And I remember it's like, it is so touching.
Hmm.
And like that kind of a character connection means something, both from like Sawyer and Jack thinking about his dad. But yeah, I'm realizing I have no memory of how Jack being related to Claire. Yeah, what payoff there is for that.
I don't think there really is one. You did remind me of that. I forgot that they met, and it's something. It's like later on, there's like something that Jack says or something that happens where like Sawyer puts it together that he met his dad. I had forgotten about that connection, but I believe that's why Christian goes to Australia. We will learn like later, like he wanted to go see Claire.
Oh, yeah. I guess then for them, it's a plot point. It's like, why did this guy go to Australia? He's a doctor. He's rich. Well, no, he has another child. This is the drunk writer's room. There's a baby over there.
There's a on the podcast where Carlton Cuse and Damon Lindelof would talk about the episodes. They always talked about how if things didn't work out with the show and they got canceled, their idea to end the show was there would be an orangutan in a tuxedo. And they would like Jack would like walk into an office and the orangutan would like turn around and he'd be like smoking a cigar and he would just explain all of the answers to the show. And he would be like, so that voice you just did is what I'm imagining the orangutan sounds like.
But why was my dad in Australia? I don't know.
They had a name for him. It's like Mr. something. I forget. I will look that up. All right, moving on. Back on the island, Jack does a little flirty with Kate. She's sinking in the thing, and she gets sad about her mom, and Jack makes a joke to cheer her up. She's like talking about sinking, and he's like, yeah, you can sink your way out of the island or whatever, and she like perks up. It's nice. It actually, at this stage, I'm actually finding it very endearing that Jack keeps coming back to the island. And ostensibly, he's doing it to like, bring them water and get back fish, like he says, and check on people for their, medical reasons. But like, it's very clear that he's always like kind of just like checking up on Kate, just be like, you want to come back to the caves with me? It's kind of cool over there. But like, he's kind of backed off. He's not as possessive as he was in previous episodes, and they've just got this they got this thing going on, and I like the thing right now at this stage of the relationship. I like the thing they're doing.
I do too. I think it's nice.
Kate says Saeed's been gone almost 1 week. Jack says Claire's going to have the baby soon. Next scene, Claire and Charlie are sharing tea. It seems like they've subtly moved their relationship backward, because I would have told you that the scene where he has like the invisible peanut butter and they share that, and he brings her back to the caves, that seemed like the beginning of a friendship / relationship. And then it feels like this scene, like you mentioned with like the editing that's off, this doesn't feel like it organically builds off of that. It feels like they've gone a few steps backwards, which, I guess that can happen in relationships, but it doesn't match up to me.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I think the peanut butter thing was what got him to basically get her to not move in with him, but it
feels like that. Yeah, it totally feels like that.
And yeah, so it was weird. Now it is like, it's a little choppy.
I think it's supposed to be that like Claire's feeling weird about, what's going on, and she's like really, isolating herself, and so she just doesn't want to deal with Charlie's thing right now. Like I get that, but it really does feel like the conversation that they have where she's just like, I don't know why you think we're friends. Like, we're not going to be friends, and we're not going to be more than friends. Like, it really felt like previously, like, they were like, oh, there's a little spark there. And now it's just kind of like, I don't know, you go away.
Yeah. Although, I guess that's the other thing, too, that I didn't consider. I just assumed everyone was sleeping in, like, the same general vicinity. Mm-hmm. But as they point out later when Claire is attacked, that they're like, we went to all the little encampments around the cave. And it's like, so people are a bit more spread out. Things are more separated.
They are, but it's also, I think somebody else mentions that, like, they're all only, like, 20 feet from each other. So it's, I don't know. It's weird. We go to a flashback. Claire and her friend go to the psychic. The psychic knows she's pregnant. He gets freaked out, gives her her money back. And it's effectively freaky. I think it's a freaky scene. We've talked about it already, but like I think it works. It makes you go like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
We cut to Claire sleeping on the island. Someone covers her mouth and what looks like a knife to me, but it turns out it's like some kind of hypodermic needle. We cut to her screaming, and as we've mentioned before, it's a terrible, terrible scream. It's pretty clear from Jack's acting that he thinks that she was dreaming. The next scene, while they're walking around, Hurley mentions Scott and Steve. I think this is our second mention maybe of Scott and Steve. Hurley makes the good point that they don't know who anybody is. He mentions that his name is Hugo Reyes. Hurley is a nickname. He won't say how he got his nickname. It's very funny.
I love Hurley. I know it's a given, but this episode is just another slam dunk for Hurley.
100%.
He's just so human and endearing. Because I even just love how he's preemptively annoyed that people would assume his name is Hurley. My name's not Hurley. It's Hugo Reyes. Why? I'm not saying. It's like, who are you arguing with right now? Oh God, I love him in this episode. I mean, every episode he's been great, but this one in particular.
Yeah.
This is the golf. Yeah.
He's very proactive in this episode, but he was also proactive in the last episode making the golf course. So he is a person who just exists to try to make people feel better. And of all of the characters in the show, I don't think there's ever anything Hurley does that I think is shitty. His characterization is pretty on point the whole time. It's just like he's just a big, nice teddy bear of a man, and it's nice. Charlie tells Claire he won't leave her. We get the inevitable flashback of Claire putting up drapes. Thomas opens a beer and says he can't do this. It feels like we've talked about this already. I feel like it's a very real scene. I feel like his anxiety, his sort of panic about like it all becoming real feels very real. Feels like almost too real. But Claire just kind of, I don't know. She's just a lot of yelling. There's not a lot of levels. It just feels like she goes from I'm being really quiet, I'm being really loud. It's a terrible accent. But so yeah, I don't know. I know you like it. You like her more.
I do. Well, no, because I do like that line that she has where she's like, just so I'm not overreacting, are you breaking up with me? I really like that delivery. But yeah, I know we've talked about it already, so I nothing else to really add to it.
Like, I know people do this every single day, and good gravy. But whenever I see scenes like this, and I see the guy just be like, oh, I can't do this. I'm walking out on my pregnant wife. I'm like, that's an option? You can do that? I didn't know that was part of the multiple choice.
Yeah, no, especially if they live together, which it seemed like they did.
Well, he asked her to move into his place. So he is effectively telling her, get out of my place with your unborn baby that is mine.
Also, I'm going to leave while you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's weird.
It's a dick move. Having babies is hard. Being in a relationship is hard. So yeah. I see where he's coming from. Wrong choice, but I get it. Back on the beach, Hurley surveys Locke, who is doing something with
he's tanning the hide.
A shoe, sand, and a hide. Is that what he's doing? He's tanning it?
Yeah.
Okay, I figured you would know.
I liked it. Because we did this once on the boats and we eventually gave up. Because it doesn't work like that. We had bags and bags of salt that we kept rubbing on it, and it made the entire harbor reek of rotten cow flesh.
Well, here's why I didn't think he was tanning the hide. It looks like the hide's already been tanned.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I'm like, I don't know what he's doing to this already tanned hide.
Yeah.
But I get for the normies in the audience, it's like it's good enough. He's doing a thing. It looks like he knows what he's doing, so we assume he knows what he's doing. We learn that Locke has been living in Tustin his whole life. Once again, shout out to the local boy. Hurley gets freaked out by the answers and uses a bystander to run away. That was very funny.
Love it.
Jack says he thinks Claire was dreaming. Charlie jumps on that, and then Kate jumps on him. Jack says Claire's due in 1 week, maybe 2. He underplays the danger, says a stress-induced labor would, quote unquote, not be good. And I wrote here, the early episodes, Jack would just say she's gonna die. Like, I feel like he has really progressed to a point where he's like, he's trying to say this in a gentle way. He's like, it's not gonna be good. Whereas like the Jack who like sat down next to Rose would be like, that woman is gonna die.
Yeah,
I don't care.
What happens if you can't get the shrapnel out? Then he'll die.
Yes, that's it. That's absolutely it. Hurley interviews Ethan, who claims to be from Ontario. Jack tries to help Claire by giving her sedatives, and she leaves for the beach. Which, I get it. In the flashback, Claire goes back to the psychic. I wrote, Australian money looks fun. I don't know what's going on with that money. That looks like Monopoly money. I don't know. There's all sorts of shapes, and it's all sorts of colors.
I'll say this, but I worked with a native Australian. Well, actually, right now I'm even working with a bunch of native Australians, but that's beside the point. But the native Australian that I talked to specifically called it funny money. And I think that's derogatory, but it's absolutely Australian money.
It makes sense that money should be different colors and different sizes for people who, are blind or can't see. But it always just does look like we're just going to put a bunch of colors together. Here you go. Psychic says Claire must parent the child and no one else. It needs her protection. Claire tells the psychic she's putting the baby up for adoption. And then months later, we learn 4 months later, the psychic has been calling her and begging her not to give up the baby, which is insane. Like, that is it. Even in the context of the episode, like, the episode makes it clear that that's weird, but like, that's crazy. Like, if you have a psychic calling you for 4 months saying you can't give up this baby.
Yeah, well, that's why too. Like, how many callers does she really get? Like, we know she works at the Fish and Fry, and we know she has at least one friend, but her mom's probably not calling. Her boyfriend isn't calling.
Yeah,
their friends. Their mutual friends probably aren't calling, so like, I don't know whose side to pick. And frankly, I still want to go out and drink, and Claire can't anymore. But I don't know, Thomas. It's just weird to me that she still gives him the courtesy of like even listening and be like, "Hey, right? Stop calling."
Yeah, she like goes. It should have been an immediate hang up. And like, yes. I'm getting a restraining order. And instead she like hashes it out with him. She's like, well, I'm not going to do that, buddy. Okay. I see what you're saying. No, my turn to talk. Okay. All right. Yeah. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
No. Arc number 4. It's been 4 months. One of the Claire and Charlie are walking to the beach. We get to Hurley talking to Boone and Shannon. Shannon calls the caves the rape caves. Which is great.
I will say this is one of those moments too where like just in terms of like a small character interaction, I'm like, oh my god, this is why I love Boone and Shannon. Boone is a social justice warrior, and Shannon is a Karen. And it's like, and that's why they fit. And I also was like, I think this might be the only mention of like real politics on the island.
Yes, I was going to mention, following up from when we were talking about Sawyer blaming Saeed for the plane crashing, Boone brings up the Patriot Act, which, wow. And once again, something I intended to look up before we actually did the episode, but for people who are too young to know, the Patriot Act was passed after 9/11 and basically gave the government real far-reaching powers to just look into the private lives of U.S. citizens. I think the act was rescinded or lapsed at some point, but it lasted for a very, very long time. And basically, Patriot Act was just shorthand for government overreach and Big Brother looking into people's lives. Really brought me back.
I do love the continuity of Boone's character where Shannon is like, he goes on marches and then he's like, dinner, march, but it's like, oh yeah, this is totally in keeping with his character. I will say too, though, I think this episode is actually what was subliminally the inspiration I had. I had a stand-up bit for a while that was basically how I'm like, man, if I worked for the NSA, I would totally just open up shop as a psychic. And I do like that parallel of, Boone feels that the census taking is like an invasion of privacy. And it's like, Claire has a psychic who may or may not have information that he is not sharing. And, I think of like, that's a neat way to tie those two things together. Anyway, I thought it was cute.
Yeah. Boone mentions the manifest, and Hurley's like, oh, great, that'll save me a bunch of time. And he's like, where is the manifest? Who has the manifest? And Boone is like, who do you think? And we get, I think, Sawyer's only appearance in this episode.
Yes.
Sporting a beautiful pair of, what are they, daisies, sunflower sunglasses. Wonderful. I love that he's just lounging on the beach, just waiting for people to come ask him for stuff. His interaction with Hurley is great. It's short, but it's fun. It's Hurley like is afraid of a lot of things, but like right now he tells Sawyer's like, you could use the points. And Sawyer does not even argue. He just says it's a good move. He calls him Stay Puffed, and he tells him where to go get it. And it's great. It's you really see the community working together, and you see these relationships falling into place. Like, it's episode 10. Like, we know that Sawyer's got it. We know Boone and Shannon are going to have something quippy to say. We know Hurley's going to be looking out for people. We know Charlie and Claire are going to be looking out for each other. Well, Charlie's going to be looking out for Claire. We know Jack is trying to hold all this stuff together. It's like the island is morphing into a civilization. It's cool. I like it. Yes,
I know 100%. And yeah, even like Locke, it's like, what does he do? Oh, he's tanning a high. Okay, well, that's what Locke would do. Yeah, I think that's what I liked about it, is how like they're very much, there's a rhythm to it. And yeah, the Sawyer scene is just so good. Because I think we've been talking about this for the last 10 episodes, but like he really doesn't get a ton of screen time. And I think it's incredible how much he does and how much he brings. Literally like 2 lines of dialogue and this just award-winning smile.
It's a great smile.
There's be wearing these glam glitter pop. I mean, that's probably has some dark underbelly too, because it probably was in like a 14-year-old suitcase.
Yeah, and she look like a child's pair of sunglasses.
Yeah. But yeah, just how he like just smiles and whatnot. I will say too, though, this is another example of like kind of that choppy editing that I talked about, because when Hurley does ask Boone, like, well, who has the manifest? And Boone gives him that look. That's where you cut.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I also think we have to remember that this is like a network primetime show, and they have to spell it out a little bit more for the audience, I think. I think that's why, because I agree with you. Like, comedically, the timing is that look, smash cut to Sawyer with the glasses. And instead, you've got the little bit of a line. Also, it might be in his contract that Ian Somerhalder has to have a certain amount of lines per episode. I don't know, but that is a thing. But I totally agree with you. Comedically, it would have been the right choice to just cut.
Yeah. That's why I feel like there was some sort of like disconnect. But yeah, or maybe there was like a contractual thing. But like Ian Somerhalder's look was great. It was totally fine on its own. You know, it reminded me of the term no small parts, only small actors again. Like, you give Josh Holloway 2 lines of dialogue, and I'm just like, man, I like watching it. Really is.
Yeah, it's a little bit of Sawyer always goes a long way. We cut back to Charlie and Claire. Claire goes into labor. Charlie accidentally confesses that he was a drug addict. We get a flashback. Claire is going over the adoption details with a couple. Claire says her dad used to sing her Catch a Falling Star. I think that probably is going to come back into play somewhere. The Pens don't. I think it does. I think Christian ends up singing it at some point. Maybe. Who knows?
Well, wait. Can we talk about this? I've already checked off all my notes, but I do gotta praise, I guess, the production design. That whole scene of her in that lawyer room, like, all of these people made me so uncomfortable.
I wrote this down. So the woman is the only one who looks like, you know, she's hopeful, she's sad, she's happy, she's all these things. The lawyer and the husband look like they want to murder Claire. I feel like the note was, you both need to look very intense, but it was too much. They put too much mustard on it. This whole scene feels very threatening, and I don't think I don't think they needed to go this hard, but they do.
Yeah, and well, like I don't know if it's like the bookshelves behind them are like taller than normal or what, but it just it feels very threatening and domineering. And
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about the adoption process, so maybe this is normal. But I feel like this could be handled in like a well-lit office, like just all of them sitting together. Like I don't know why they have to be in this boardroom where it looks like Claire's getting divorced from humanity or something. Like I don't know. But yeah, no, it's all very intense. It's crazy. Yeah, the pens don't work. Is that coincidence or is it magical? I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know how we're supposed to take that, actually. I don't know if it's supposed to be a sign or if it's not, because they're not on the island, but magical things can happen off the island sometimes. I don't know.
I will say, in terms of Emily's acting, or maybe the editing, she doesn't try very hard. I'm like,
this pen doesn't work. We see her. I think the flashback ends with her knocking on the psychic's door. Charlie's running, finds Ethan. Tells Ethan to go get Jack. Mistake. Back to the flashback. The psychic claims that there's a couple in LA that will take care of baby. He even gives her $6,000 to go and claims that she will get another $6,000 when she gets to LA. Charlie says the psychic might have known about the plane crash and put her on the plane to make sure she did raise the baby. Maybe yes, maybe no. Flight 815. I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but those are also ARC numbers. We've probably mentioned it before.
I'm realizing now that you mentioned that he gives her $6,000. I'm like, man, that is another. They just went one more.
I wonder why they didn't use the regular numbers there.
Well, I feel like it's the Omen thing. Is that they wait? It's like, how long's it been? 66 seconds. I'm 6 weeks late. Here's $6,000. I think it is. They're trying to drive home that the child is Satan incarnate. Like,
you know what? You're absolutely right. That is now correct. That is what's going on here. They're telling that baby is Satan. We see Saeed hobbling through the jungle. He gets back to the caves. He tells Jack they're not alone. I almost think it would have been better to wait on that because you have both that and at the exact same time you have Hurley coming in saying somebody wasn't on the manifest. And I feel like, I don't know. For me, it feels like you should have done one or the other, and it should have been the Hurley one. That would have been the better one.
His delivery of that line is so good.
Yes.
He wasn't on the plane.
Yeah.
I can't even do it.
I love it. Because I think I hear that in my head. And, as we've said, this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite endings to an episode in the show. Like, I think it's what this show does well is leaving you with a hell of a cliffhanger. And this is a bombshell because up to this point, it's like, okay, we've met Rousseau, but we know how she got to the island. We know that she thinks there's other people around, and we think we heard some whispers, but maybe that was just in his head. And then we have solid visual confirmation. There is somebody on this island who did not come on the plane, and he has an agenda. And holy shit.
Like a legitimate villain, because we're like, I don't know how I feel about Locke. Sawyer, kind of a dick. But then, to actually have someone who it's like, oh, he's been attacking the pregnant woman, and it's like, well, that's not okay. Sawyer wouldn't do that. Locke wouldn't do that. And it's like, it's just like, it very much raises the stakes.
Mm-hmm. So the last thing of the episode is we just see Ethan giving his creepy stare to Claire. He does say hello there, which I don't know if this was before or after. I think this was before Revenge of the Sith. So I'm going to say that George Lucas stole hello there from Damon Lindelof. Sorry, it's a meme. It's a whole thing. Obi-Wan Kenobi says hello there. But actually, now that I think about it, I think he says it in the original trilogy, and so George Lucas was just copying himself. And that is Raised by Another. You know what? I think I've turned around a little bit on this episode. I think
that's what I'm saying. I feel like I was like, I don't feel bad about this. I don't feel like, but like no, like on a rewatch, I'm like, I think that thing that you mentioned actually towards the end here about how all the characters, like, we know how they're going to respond. Like when he walks up to Boone and Shannon, when he walks up to Sawyer, like, there's definitely a rhythm to it that I think is super neat. I like this.
This episode was written by Lynne E. Litt. This is the only episode of Lost that she wrote. According to Lostpedia, she served as a consulting producer on the first season from the episode Tabula Rasa until Hearts and Minds. So it looks like her participation in the show was somewhat limited. But yeah, not a bad episode. I do feel like the Lindelof influence here. I think that he probably had some pretty major notes on the direction. But yeah, I stand by what I said before. I think that it wouldn't rank anywhere near my favorite episodes, but not a bad episode by any stretch. And it's an important, I think, a foundational episode for building what's to come.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already thinking ahead to when Ethan abducts the both of them, which I'm still kind of like, logistically, how did he do that?
Well, I always felt the implication was that Ethan was like superhumanly strong. Like he's not like a normal human. And there's Mikhail, the guy with the eye patch, who like can't die.
Oh yeah.
But there's something. And does
at the very least, I guess I'm realizing now, given that they said that Claire's diet is 4 and bananas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wonder if this is also like the difference between someone who is malnourished, sleep deprived, not getting, versus like Ethan, who comes from, as we know now, a village of completely like healthy.
Yeah. Also, like, Charlie's a little guy. He's not. You can't. He's a hobbit. You can't. It's not too hard to mess with him. I remember there's a fight between Ethan and Jack, either in the next episode or the episode after, that's really brutal, where like Ethan just beats the shit out of him.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and it's like, dude, I thought that would be a more evenly matched, but it is not.
No. There was something else. There was like one more thing. What else? Oh no, it was what I was gonna say is, if this were a show being made today, this would be the end of the show. Episode 10 is like, few streaming shows go past 10 episodes these days. Like usually they're like 8 or 10.
Oh yeah.
And like the fact that there's still like 12 or 14 more episodes in this season just really shows like it's crazy like how much show there is in this show.
All right though. I'm excited for the next one. I don't even know who next one. Oh no, next one is, every time I read the title of it, I always assume it's going to be a Sawyer episode, and I think it's a Jack episode.
Is it all the Cowboys' best daddy issues?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always think that one is referencing Kate, which doesn't make sense because Kate's not a cowboy. But yeah, I always think that's a Kate episode.
I feel like the fish and fry. It feels like they named it that just for her to say it in that accent.
There is something specifically about her Australia accent that I do find very soothing. Like it is, I like the way that she pronounces things.
My $5 an hour job at Fish and Fry.
But when she says stuff like fish and fry, it was like, I don't know why. It just kind of gives me a tickle in my ear. I don't.
Yeah. Fish and fry. $5 an hour at the Fish and Fry.
All right.
And bananas. There's a lot of alliteration in this episode.
Well, the writer is Lynne E. Litt. She has alliteration in her own name, so there you go.